What do you see? You might say you see a person. He seems to be making something. He's kind of hunched over a desk. Maybe you're looking at what he's wearing. He's got a watch, shirt, some type of jacket. Maybe you're not looking at the person at all. Maybe you're looking over to the left. There's like this installation with a bunch of cables. Maybe you're trying to figure out what's on the screen. You could be looking at quite a few things. And this is no surprise, as images are an extremely rich source of information. One attestament to this is probably just the amount of research you can find here today involving images in one way or another. But sometimes this excess of information can be more of a problem than a benefit. It could be a problem when you're dealing with identifiable people, because then you have to adhere to strict rules on why and how you capture the data under GDPR. It could be a problem when your data contains some sort of intellectual property, because, well, you probably don't want to share your data as freely if it contains the steps to manufacture a problem. And it can be a problem because of this phenomena called function creep. And function creep is where you collect data to do one specific thing, but then gradually along the way, you expand the number of uses for this data, often hurting the privacy and trust of those involved. Say you want to put up cameras in your warehouse to check out your workers, because you notice that to make your product, they're kind of hunched over their desk, and you're worried for their ergonomic health. Well, as soon as you have those cameras installed, what's stopping you from also using them to check if they're wearing proper safety equipment at all times? Or, a lot worse, to see if they're not taking too many breaks. Now, you might be a nice person, not actually do this, but so long as all the information is there, and so are the possibilities. My PhD is about figuring out how we can reduce the amount of information in images to prevent this function creep. And I think the most optimal way to do this is by working opt-in. And with opt-in, I mean that we transform the images into a version that only contain the necessary information for one specific task. Over the past few years, I've worked at developing such a technique for an opt-in transformation and applied it to a simple problem. Now, under the Flanders AI program, we're extending this technique towards the real-world use case and implementing it in an end-to-end system. Let me start by showing you how we can do this transformation. And the way we do so is with an adversarial scheme. For those of you familiar with generative adversarial networks, it works a lot similar to that. We have one network called the obfuscator, which takes in the original image and transforms it into an opt-in view. A view that is only usable for one specific task, which we parameterize by a neural network. Now, to ensure it's truly opt-in, we use a different network called the deobfuscator, which takes in this opt-in view and tries to reconstruct the original image from it. So the more information contained in this opt-in view, the better it will be at reconstructing. Now, obviously, the obfuscator wants to prevent this. And by pitting both of these networks against each other, they continually improve upon one another, and we end up with a very strong obfuscator. An obfuscator that we can use to tune the privacy utility trade-off to our liking. And we've done so for the problem of pedestrian detection, where on a normal image, you'd be able to detect pedestrians quite well, so you'd have a very high utility. However, you'd also be able to identify them, see what they're wearing. So there's very little privacy protection. We can increase the privacy protection by doing something like a very strong blur, but then we lose a lot of utility. Now, with our technique, we can have it both. By taking a small hit on utility and privacy, we end up with a more optimal position in this spectrum. Now, under the Flanders AI program, in the human-machine flexible production use case, I, together with the partners at Flanders Make, are working on extending this technique towards the ergonomics problem I described earlier. Not only are we extending the definition of privacy from just personal privacy to also containing protection of IP-sensitive aspects, we're also working on a much more difficult use case, as ergonomics assessment requires fine-grained key point detection across multiple cameras. Finally, we're looking into implementing this in an end-to-end system, where, for optimal security reasons, the filtering should take place on the cameras themselves in some sort of secure processing environment. That way, we can ensure that as soon as the footage leaves the camera, it's only usable for one task, thus making it opt-in, preventing function creep, and protecting the privacy of those involved. With this project, we want to show you that being mindful of your data and the privacy of those involved is a valid option for your project in the future. So hopefully, those involved can feel a bit more secure if the data looks a little bit less like the one on the left and a bit more like the one on the right. Thank you.